Of course, we all know like resolutions fizzle out by February, and then you're left like being hard on yourself again, the way you always have. And so, if we can shift the way we relate to ourselves versus shifting our behavior, I think that's where we find a lot more agency and a lot more freedom in how we move through the world.
We're such a stupid success focused society, which is about the finish line and the trophy. Yet any coach, any therapist, anyone that you have on here, they're not going to say, it's never about the finish line or the trophy. It's about what that motivation gets you to do in the process of striving for that.
Hey friends, Happy New Year and welcome to Season 2 of the Morse Code Podcast. I'm Eric Morse. As we launch into 2026 and Season 2 of this undertaking, we're branching out a bit. Still a St. Louis podcast grappling with St. Louis issues, but I'm planning to pull in more people with a national profile and broader experiences who will hopefully be entertaining and interesting and relevant. But as we embark on a new year, I wanted to tap some local experts for advice and insights on starting the year strong and fresh, physically, mentally, and spiritually. The voices you just heard were Diane Davis and Travis Thomas. Diane is a therapist who specializes in treating complex trauma, and full disclosure, I just happen to be Diane's boyfriend. And Travis Thomas is an author, speaker, and mindset coach for the U.S. men's national soccer team and the St. Louis University men's soccer team. You're also going to hear from Jen McDaniel, a nutritionist and dietitian, founder of McDaniel Nutrition Therapy, and host of the Love You More podcast. And Aaron Foz, a fitness instructor and founder of La Forme Studio. And finally, for those of us for whom the new year means navigating new and uncharted territory with our dear offspring, we have the privilege of speaking to Anita Santiago, a trauma therapist with expertise in family and parenting issues, ADHD, conflict, and all the rest. I really appreciated their collective advice because it ranged from very concrete and tactical, make sure to write down Jen's 1-2-3 plan, to the broader approaches to life and our relationships to each other, to ourselves, and to our circumstances. Here's Aaron and Jen talking about the importance of consistency and manageable goals, and Travis piggybacks at the end to talk about micro commitments. Stay tuned afterward for the full interviews. Happy New Year.
I think the key to setting yourself up for success is to just look for consistency, and not that consistency means that you have to do the same thing all of the time. So I think a lot of times we set a really high bar for ourselves, and then when you don't meet that metric, you feel like a failure.
You should always ask yourself 3 questions when you're deciding to pursue a certain habit or behavior. And one, is it easy? Is it something that would be like really easy for you to do? Number 2, would it be something that you look forward to doing? Like, is it appealing? You know, you wake up in the morning, you're like, oh yeah, I'd have that smoothie. That sounds delicious, you know? And then the third one, is it like, does it help you towards your goals, you know, of what you're wanting to achieve? Kind of that clarity thing that I talked about in the very beginning. And I think that, you know, when we keep the bar a little lower, you know, we're much more likely to be able to jump over it and accomplish it. And then that builds motivation, that builds confidence.
We want to make it life-proof. And I think having micro commitments, micro habits, where we can squeeze them in, small steps over time, is what get us to the top of that mountain. Whatever the big goals that we have, great. What's most important today is just starting. Just start.
Here's Aaron Foz, fitness instructor and founder of La Forme Studio. Obviously, first of the year, everybody gets into New Year's resolutions. And of course, fitness is probably the most common one of the most common ones. And I would love just if you could give some advice or even just words of inspiration about ways to realistically and sustainably enter the new year.
I think the key to setting yourself up for success is to just look for consistency, and not that consistency means that you have to do the same thing all of the time. So I think a lot of times we set a really high bar for ourselves. And then when you don't meet that metric, you feel like a failure. And so I think this comes with time too. Definitely, like fitness for me personally has evolved over the decades, where what I did in my 20s and 30s looks very different than my 40s. And just having more compassion, grace, forgiveness for your day and what it might look like. It might be like, okay, I did 10 setups, 10 push-ups, and held a plank and walked, and that is all I could get done today. And just know that you are putting your best foot forward.
Can you talk about how fitness and exercise and movement can benefit anyone when they move into the new year?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we feel our best when we are finding some movement. It is kind of in being stationary where we start to just, I think you get in here first and you start to think kind of negative thoughts. I mean, there's the adage of just like, if you're in a bad mood, get up and go for a walk, and it's going to kind of turn things around. Something as simple as that. It doesn't have to be overly complicated or complex, but just starting somewhere. And I think, again, kind of going back, many people are like, well, if I'm not running 3 miles, then what am I doing? But it can be really small incremental build. And I think that is what sustains over time. And you start to feel like I can consistently do this instead of like having such a big, audacious goal that doesn't feel attainable. So I know I've always stuck with things when it fits into my life versus the other way around as well. And like, okay, if I have to do a lot of mental gymnastics and preparation to get to do something, it's going to break down somewhere along the way for me. I'm not going to do that. Or I'll fall out of it, or I won't be able to sustain it. And I think that goes for a lot of people.
Yeah, for sure.
I had to ask you, what are you doing to work out? How are you getting out of your head?
Great question.
We have to get out of here. That's the problem. I think at the end of the day is can we get out of our heads, because that is the most difficult muscle of all.
Oh my God. Yeah. And my brain can really go into overdrive if I don't. And that exercise helps with that. And then also, creative projects for me and stuff. Yes. But during the pandemic, I set up a little home gym. And so now I run when I can, and I just do like free weights in my little home gym.
Well, that's the thing too, is I think so many of us set up home gyms during that period, or what we could. And we missed out on how fun it is to be in community with one another. And I know I missed that. I've taught fitness off and on for over 2 decades now. And I was like, why isn't this? I've got everything here. Like I have all the boxes checked, but something still feels really flat. And I'm not finding it in other studios. I keep trying. And I'm like, I want warmth. I want somebody to smile and know my name when I walk in, and know that there's a greater purpose and a greater good for what we're doing. So that's fun. We have fun. And I think too, something is like to really make sure you're introducing play, because we do it so well as children. And as adults, we don't. We stop playing. And it's like, can we just introduce play? So in our classes, our instructor team, they say something like, I'm going to ask you to do this. Like, just listen. Just work with me here. And it may be something that pushes you a little out of your comfort zone. And you get that sense of like play. It's okay to fail. I also think a lot of adults, we feel like it's all or nothing. And there's so much more. And from my experience, there's so much more to learn from failure than there is from most of my successes. I'm like, okay, that was great. But like, I learned 15 more things from the thing I failed at than what I've succeeded at.
This is dietitian and nutritional therapist Jen McDaniel.
It's important that we don't do things in such a lofty way, because I think sometimes we can go into things with a lot of momentum and a lot of energy. But personally, this time of the year is a hard time for me to conjure up that level of motivation. I mean, it's winter out, here in St. Louis, things are kind of cold and hibernation. And so to me, it feels like there's no need to really push things, but just to move in more smaller shifts, and so I work with a lot of my clients in just those small shift areas of life. And to me, I think one of the most important ones that has to do with our health is getting enough sleep. And it's also a great time to be getting a little bit more sleep. It's darker. We want to go to bed a little bit more early, naturally. And if people want to eat better, we tend to eat better when we're not tired. We have hunger and fullness hormones that will work much better when we're in a rested state. So, and if people want to change, of course, January is like weight loss season for many people. And if you want, we know that people have much better success with body composition, maintaining muscle and losing body fat when they get enough sleep and their hormones are working in their favor. And you can build more muscle when you get enough rest. So that part is really helpful too. And then I think right now, I don't know if you sense this, Eric, but there's been a lot of conversation around protein and people making sure they're getting enough. And I think that's awesome. I think it's always good to do an assessment on like, am I getting enough protein? And, because we want to make sure that we have enough lean mass. We know like our muscle is really a crucial material for our health span, living a long, not just a long life, but a long, healthy, high functioning life. And so protein can help us to do that. But as I'm sure your movement expert that you're going to bring on will also attest to, you can't build muscle if you don't use the muscle, And so I've seen so much of this push for protein, but I think that we might be missing the mark a little bit. Because when people are only focusing on one thing, and in particular protein, it might sort of squeeze out some of the other good things. And that other good thing that I talk a lot about as a dietitian is fiber. Fiber, which we get from plants, right? We get fiber from fruits and vegetables and whole grains and nuts and seeds and beans. And plant proteins like tofu, for instance. Those fibers are so crucial for our chronic disease management. Fibers are really important for even our mood because our gut health is related to our mental health. And there's a connection between the gut and the mind that are always communicating. So when we have a lot of different diverse fibers in our diet, our whole systems run so much better. So some of those smaller shifts, just after what I just talked about, would be like, can we go to bed 15 minutes earlier? Can we like not do things like laundry instead of losing sleep? Those things can wait. Can we prioritize the power of rest? And when it comes to getting my clients to getting enough fiber, I might even say things like, hey, what about trying what I call the 1-2-3 method, which is getting one plant at breakfast, 2 plants at lunch, and 3 different types of plants at dinner, So yeah, it's a little less grandiose over here about like, New Year's overhauls. And it's a lot more about these subtle shifts that we can do to just feel physically and mentally better. You should always ask yourself 3 questions when you're deciding to pursue a certain habit or behavior. And one, is it easy? Is it something that would be like really easy for you to do? Number 2, would it be something that you look forward to doing? Like, is it appealing? We wake up in the morning, like, oh yeah, I'd have that smoothie. That sounds delicious, And then the third one, is it like, does it help you towards your goals, of what you're wanting to achieve? Kind of that clarity thing that I talked about in the very beginning. And I think that, when we keep the bar a little lower, we're much more likely to be able to jump over it and accomplish it. And then that builds motivation, that builds confidence. And then that builds habits that we don't have to like use any kind of willpower for. I don't think we should use willpower. Willpower is a very finite resource.
The family, we do kind of a, going on to, I've been doing it for a couple of years, but then as a family, we've started doing it now the last 2 years where we go to the beach and everyone writes kind of a word in the sand, their intention for the year. And then, I know my wife and I are pretty good about, I know I speak from experience that I use it sort of as an anchor. That's sort of the reflection process. So if you look at a new year, a new you from a process standpoint, is you want to build in some reflection time, which is what did I experience? What did I learn? What am I processing from the previous year? For us, it's 2025. And then looking at the new year or the next month and saying like, okay, what are the changes I want to make? What behaviors, what aspects of my life, what do I want to lean into? I really want to spend time taking care of myself physically or spiritually, mentally, holistically. I would love to improve that in the new year. Well, what would that look like? And then it's taking the big and making it small, take the complex and make it simple, and saying like, okay, well, if that's what the ideal looks like, what does my start look like? And it's funny, I was just doing I do sort of an inspirational once or twice a week, and being that this is the first, as we record this, the first Monday of 2026, the inspiration for today was just start. And so it doesn't, whatever the big goals that we have, great. What's most important today is just starting. And so Eric, I'm a big fan of micro commitments, of identifying what are those different aspects of our life that we would love to just think of it this way. I want to give more energy to blank, right? I want to give more energy to my physical health. I want to give more energy to spirituality. I want to give more energy to learning an instrument. I want to give more energy to connecting with more people in my life. Great. No matter what we ideally would like to do or try to do, we have this idea of intention around areas that we would like to improve. That's what we want to give. And again, it's like, I'm just giving my energy to it. And so if I'm going to give my energy to it, how can I start that today? Right? So improving my physical health doesn't have to be I'm committing to an hour in the gym every day. It might just be I'm committing to, getting out and doing something every day, even if it's a 10-minute walk around my neighborhood in freezing temperature, even if it's sitting down for 5 minutes and I'm going to commit to stretching, maybe doing as many push-ups as I can do, maybe doing a few sit-ups. And if we commit to, again, that micro habits or micro challenges or small steps over time is what get us to the top of that mountain. And really, like I was just, had a coaching call with someone the other day, Aaron. It's like the end goal is motivation, but it's really never about the end goal, right? It's the motivation that gets us out of our comfort zone to challenge what we think is possible, to challenge our habits and our routines. And then what happens as a result of that motivation is growth. If we get to the end goal, fantastic. But it's the motivation that just to get us out of our comfort zone into trying something new is automatically going to create a sense of, it's going to shift our mindset. It's going to shift our belief system. It's going to shift what we feel is possible. And if we can do that, that is what growth looks like.
Instead of creating resolutions or goals, it's more of an intention, and it's more of like a way you relate to yourself. I have a mentor who says there's what is and there's what we do to ourselves with what is. And this sort of relational piece, like how do you relate to yourself? How do you relate to others in the world? I think that's where we can find a lot more agency and a lot more compassion for the things that we're doing. So I've identified sort of a 3-step process for picking your word if you're interested in hearing the how-to of it all.
I sure am.
Okay, so the first step is to think about like what historically feels hard for you. So when things get stressful for me, I usually blank. Maybe you over effort, maybe you shut down, maybe you become really critical. Not you, Eric, but like you more broadly. Maybe you avoid things. And so you kind of figure out what your go-to like survival strategy is. Like, how do you cope historically with things that are really stressful? And then step two is you're going to pick a word that sort of like softens that pattern. So if you historically over effort, maybe your word is ease or spaciousness or enoughness. If you typically find yourself shutting down, maybe you want more engagement or presence or warmth or aliveness. If you find yourself being really critical, maybe you want more kindness or compassion or respect or allowing, like just letting other people be. So it's not like aspirational perfectionism. It's just like a new orientation, like a direction that you turn to. And like really land on something, like really pick a word that encapsulates what might be sort of an antidote or a softening to what you typically do in stress that often causes more stress when we do that thing. And then if you want to like really crystallize it more, the next step would be to create like a grounding question, like a way to reorient yourself in this more connected place. Like, so it could be, so my word for the year is aliveness. And so a question I would ask myself going forward is, what would it look like to relate to the situation with more aliveness right now? To me, aliveness means like presence, spirit, enthusiasm, not disconnecting or shutting down. So what would it look like to relate to this situation or to this person or to myself with more aliveness in this moment? And so I think this like intention setting process, this picking a word or a question, it just creates a lot more space because of course we all know like resolutions fizzle out by February and then you're left like being hard on yourself again the way you always have. And so if we can shift the way we relate to ourselves versus shifting our behavior, I think that's where we find a lot more agency and a lot more freedom in how we move through the world.
As I heard you explain that, my brain went to behavioral things.
Mm-hmm.
Like you were talking about how do people, respond to stress or whatever. And you said over effort or, shutting down or whatever. I was thinking overeating or drinking or, I was thinking of behaviors. And I'm wondering if what you're describing is the same thing or if there's something that is like a step before the behavior happens that this word of the year like helps kind of disrupt a pattern.
Yeah, it can be. I mean, I think anything can be used for connection or disconnection. So what I like to do often with my clients is this process of deconstruction, exactly what you're describing, because states and behaviors get really collapsed and then you lose track of like, it feels like there's no agency, no insight, no space between whatever the thing is and then whatever the doing is. And then how you're like the shame or the guilt or the whatever, the disconnection that you're putting on top of that. So I think it's a really useful exercise is before you find yourself just like standing in the kitchen at 10 p.m. eating M&Ms, like what happened before that? Like what was it that triggered this disconnection? And it sounds like very therapist-y of me to say, but like noticing what's happening and internally is part of the solution. Like even just noticing it disrupts that pattern because we do all these things so automatically without thinking and then shame ourselves afterwards. But if you can notice what's happening before the M&Ms, it helps to kind of untangle this collapsed place that a lot of us find ourselves in.
So assuming that we're talking about behaviors that have been learned and you might say perfected over decades in many cases, and feel comforting even when they're not. What's a trick or a strategy for disrupting that, like you're talking about, in a way that doesn't just feel like willpower. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the willpower is where you then just like are introducing more shame into the mix, because that, like you said, like you developed these strategies, these coping mechanisms for a reason. And so I think a really critical ingredient here is compassion. Like, oh, yeah, and of course I'm doing this because that thing earlier today with my kids or with my boss was really hard. And then now, of course, I'm doing this. Like having compassion for the behavior instead of shaming the behavior, because putting more pressure on top of things like gets us into a different place in our nervous system. Even we like relate to the world differently if we're pressuring or shaming or guilting ourselves for whatever's already happening. And then you can't really even see it clearly. So recognizing like, okay, yeah, this is familiar. I know I do this and it's okay. And like, here's my intention for going forward. What I want is more space. What I want is more compassion or curiosity or presence or whatever it is. And recognizing that for whatever reason, because of things in your past, like that creates a dilemma, an internal dilemma. Because there's always these dilemmas. Like every single one of us has this core dilemma within us. Like, yes, I like desperately want to connect with people, and that feels really terrifying. I desperately want to have, I don't know, meet my own needs, and something about that feels really threatening. Like there's a reason these dilemmas exist within us, and having some compassion and awareness about that instead of just being really hard on yourself for it, is where I think you develop more agency and then more capacity for change. When you bump up against these behaviors or these things that have kept you safe and you try to rip those things away, like you're left feeling pretty raw. And so of course you want to defend against that. And so that's why I think this intention setting is helpful, because it's relational. It's not corrective. It's not like totally changing your entire temperament and personality and state of being. You're still working within what's authentic to you in a much gentler way. And so then you don't feel like you have to defend against it or disconnect from it or shut down the way you always have. You feel like, okay, well, I can work within this because it's in support of what I actually want for myself. A thing that's been coming up for me a lot lately, and with clients too, is as long as you're looking outside of yourself for safety, you're never gonna find it. And so when I think about allowing yourself to be in relationship with other people, it includes like trusting in your own sense of okayness, regardless of what the behavior on the other end is. Like you are the ultimate caregiver of your own needs.
So Erin and Jen both talked a good bit about consistency, about making our goals and the steps that we need to achieve them small, bite-size, no pun intended, and manageable, which was really helpful for me. And Travis took that and built on the idea of micro commitments. And then he also pivoted a little bit to talking about intention. Both Travis and Diane talked about setting an intention for the year, a word for the year, and how we can carry that through the year and really use that as a jumping off point for growth. Those were all intrapersonal things and individual things for the most part. My next conversation was with Anita Santiago, who I mentioned is a family therapist. And we talked a good bit about our relationships with our kids, with our families, and how we relate to a world that is often cruel and unjust. I really enjoyed this conversation with her, and I'm looking forward to digging in a little further. Enjoy Anita Santiago.
I had seen about social justice and
Yeah.
things that kids used to didn't have to navigate, but they're navigating now. And I think,
Mhm.
especially for those of us in marginalized communities, this is not something that we're used to dealing with. And how do we talk to our kids about these things and help them be okay?
Yeah. So what are some things that people can kind of bring with them into the new year about providing that kind of reassurance? It can be scary.
Absolutely. And I think,
Yeah.
if you go back in time, there was a time where kids played with toys, did use their imagination. Now kids have to be responsible for understanding the dynamics of race, gender, sexual orientation that may put them at risk, may put their families at risk. These are things that kids didn't really used to have to deal with. And so now we're asking children to be responsible for all these things, know what to do, and then somehow function. And we wonder why we see so
Yeah.
much anxiety and sometimes kids being down or not feeling well. I think resilience is a big word that I use a lot, and just in the sense
Mhm.
of, we've been through a lot of stuff. Families have been through a lot of stuff. People have been through a lot of stuff, and just remembering that you've made it through some tough times and drawing on those skills to do so. But like you said, also understanding the intersection of why these things are important. And I think the real stress that we see in the mental health field is the little kids
Mm.
because they don't have the words, they don't have the way to communicate how all these things make them feel. If your family is not a traditional family and you're bullied or people treat you different, little kids don't necessarily know what to do with that. Race is a big thing right now. It's in the news all the time. Little kids
Mhm.
don't know what to do when they look in the mirror and they can't change themselves. And
Yeah.
so this could really lead to a lot of anxiety. We see it in behaviors. If parents can just, provide that reassurance, I'm here for you. We're here for you. We're in this together. You're not alone. And sometimes even with kids making a story to explain
Mm.
things at their appropriate level, like in my home, we use the little people things, little, they're called little people actually. And
Uh-huh.
we make stories and that gives them a way to kind of express what's on their mind. But then you can kind of change that narrative to, yes, it doesn't really feel good when people say mean things or they treat you different. But we know that these people, the positive people in your life, love you and support you. And those are the people that you can talk to about things. And I think one thing that we struggle with as a country is a sense of community. A lot of places and spaces have lost community. And so where there's an opportunity to build community with other parents, with other people, you may not have family members that live close to you. You may know parents because of your kids, and giving the kids a sense of community that they belong, that they're cared for, and that it's okay, even though we know that everything going on is really dicey.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that sense of community a lot lately. It was sort of behind what started this podcast, but so I will take that and turn it into another question. I've got two teenage boys and two tween girls, and my boys, especially my oldest one, the way they socialize with their friends, even my oldest son has two friends who live within a quarter mile of here of us, and they're entirely online. And he goes to his room and he gets on the computer and he hangs out with the people who are a couple hundred yards away. And I think a lot about his relationships and his sense of community. And do you have any thoughts about trends that you see with teens and how they're interacting with their peers and and ways to still kind of instill that sense of community or relationships?
Well, I think as a parent, depending on when you came up, back in our days, it was the Coca-Cola commercials and us holding hands and everybody singing and getting along. And that was our community, right? Then into the technology age where the teenagers and tweens today started life with electronic devices and online experiences. They know how to navigate that well. And because we don't have a sense of community, we don't often promote in-person stuff. We're parents, we're busy, we're working. Here's a tablet, here's a computer. I just need 5 minutes. And so inadvertently, our young people have learned that their space, their comfortable space, is the digital space. And when we come in and say, oh my gosh, you need people-to-people contact and let's have fun, they go, what? Like, we've never done that before. So for them, it's very strange. I think as parents and adults, we have to not fear the digital space, but we have to get in the digital space as well so that we understand the nuances. Many, many kids know how to be safe online, but many kids don't. And if we're not aware of what Roblox is, and we're not aware of what Minecraft is, and how that's different from the Sims that we played, and how that's different from pole position and Pac-Man that probably you and I played, if we don't understand those nuances, we don't have the skills to gauge whether our kids are really okay or not. I don't think being in the digital space to be social is necessarily a problem. The problem is when you make it a bad thing and introduce, I as an adult think in person is the only way for you to have community. It should be a both and, not an either or.
It sounds like you also are advocating or would advocate coming to them as much as or more than bringing them to us. This is the way we did it back in my day.
Right.
This is the right way to do things. Is that
I think that what we forget as adults, because, we know, I'm the adult, I know, I have the knowledge base, but we forget that it's a bi-directional relationship. It's a collaborative relationship. So if we don't build that collaboration with our kids and that sense of, hey, I'm your parent and I know a lot of things, but I want to hear what you have to say. I want to know what you know before I come at you with why you should or shouldn't do something. I think in our authoritarian parenting, which many people in our generation experienced, we turn around and we become authoritarian parents, and we don't know how to listen. We don't know how to incorporate our kids' input and point of view into the conversation. We don't know how to build a conversation because we're invested in being correct as a parent. So these are areas that personally I was challenged in, and I had to find a way to say, hey, I really want to be a part of your life. And you know what I ended up doing? I ended up saying, hey, I really want to be a part of your life. Show me what's cool. What's the slang? I want to learn. And they were like, really? And I was like, yeah. So I had to kind of back off of the authoritarianism. I'm still mom, I still make the rules, but I don't have to flex the authority, because if I do that, we can't have a conversation.
That was awesome. I'm so grateful to all of my guests for giving their time, their expertise, and a little bit of inspiration as we launch into a new year. I'm going to let Anita Santiago have the last word. If you are feeling in pain, if you're feeling loss, if you're feeling anxious, we're all trying to deal with a crazy world, and don't be afraid to ask for help. And remember that you matter. Thanks, everybody. Happy New Year.
One of the things that we have to do is we have to take care of ourselves, mind, body, and soul. And if you feel like you need to reach out to someone to help with that, it's okay. There are a lot of compassionate, caring therapists and people out here that are willing to help, but we can't help if you don't ask.
Game over.